is up? I'm Rick, the Fat Man GM. You may or may have not have heard of me mabbling and rambling on a few of the YouTube channels and Facebook channels regarding to our hobby, role-playing games in general, tabletop games, wargaming, so on, etc. I have started back when I was in my early teens. I have well over 40 years worth of experience in this hobby that we love and share. And a big part of what I like to do is go back and revisit a lot of the stuff that I have and have accumulated in my gaming career, if you will. And everything from MERP, Starfleet, from FASA, a slew of Dungeons and Dragons and Shadowrun, Star Wars, etc., etc., etc. And I revisit these items individually, and hopefully to give some nostalgia for myself, to give you a little bit of an insight into some game system that you may or may not have heard of or may have not had the opportunity to play, and to remind those of us out there that do have them that these are quite viable and still entertaining today. So here we go. Alright, this is Lords of Middle-earth from the Middle-earth role-playing game, otherwise known as MERP, produced by Iron Crown Enterprises, ICE, and this is Volume 1, The Immortals, Elves, Maiar, and Valar, a fantasy game character compendium. It's a nice source book addition to The Lord of the Rings. Even if you don't ever play the game, but you're a fan of J.R.R. Tolkien's works, these would be considered beta canon material. If you're not familiar with the term, beta canon is fan-based material and or industry-based stuff that's not created by the original work or the original author. So while the names and some of the places and stuff are in there in his works, they have taken it upon themselves to give the game references material and fill in the backstories and to fluff up those particular names and places and things like that, as well as add additional material, which becomes considered beta canon. It's an excellent read in and of itself, just by itself, because there's so much information. I can't really bring it to life in a video without making it an hour long or more, and we're not really wanting to do that. This particular one was produced, copyright 1986, under the Tolkien Enterprise division of the blah blah blah. It's funny how a lot of my stuff comes from the 80s, isn't it? 1986. I believe bought this in 87 or 88, but knowing me, it could have well been brand new when I bought it. It would have been brand new. I could have bought it the same year it came out. Anyway, we have introduction using the Lords of Miller guidelines. As always, with Iron Crown material for MERP, we have some conversion charts and systems to allow things to be converted from Rollmaster to Dungeons and Dragons based off of your dice system or your preferences, which these charts allow you to make that transition fairly painlessly and easily. And ironically, if you reverse this, you can do the same thing. So I can take modules that were created for Dungeons and Dragons, for example, and reverse engineer the mechanics of the stats for hitting things and for the NPCs and beasties and stuff like that, and play them in a Middle-earth setting if I wanted to. Converting combat abilities, converting spells and spell lists, note on levels, skill bonuses. Now we start with the Valar. The Valar were the highest among Ainur who came to awe. And if I'm not pronouncing these things right, you're more than welcome to put it down in the comments. There were 14 Valar, including the High Anu Morgoth, who fell from the excluding. So originally there were actually 15. Who fell from grace forever, removed from his name from the rolls of the exalted. As Ainur, the Valar are immortal spirits without need or corporal conveyance. Their spirits only took form so they could interact with the children of Uru, however you want to pronounce it. Valar's role, which is the creation and wardship of Arda and the heavens, dictate their need for a shape and their occasional adoption of physical bodies. Guardians of the material world require material ties. An overview of the Valar, the Maiar, and the Free Peoples, the Valar history, the origin of evil, the Spring of Arda, the Two Lamps. Like I said, I'm not going to read all that stuff for you because we'd be here for days, for days. I'd have to do episodes, and I'm not. Who knows? 20 years from now, I ain't got nothing else better to do. Maybe I'll do it that way. The founding of Amun, the two trees. A lot of this is common stuff. If it's in the Lord of the Rings briefly, if you really want to know, read the Silmarillion. I would highly recommend reading that particular work backwards. I don't mean line by line, but segment by segment. It made more sense to me when I was a young man. I tried to read it front to back, and I just couldn't chew my way through it. Years later, I managed to do it that way, but I found it more easier to go and start in the back and work my way to the front of the book in reverse, because it made more sense to me at that point. Anyway, Battle of Powers, Morgoth's Repentance, The Long Night, Morgoth's Return, The Iron Crown of Morgoth, blah blah blah. So basically all the history of the prehistory of the world as it's created, the prophecy of North, the coming of Fingolfin. So a lot of history here. The Valar's guardianship after the downfall, the end of the Second Age. The Valar intervention is when Sauron rose again. Well, that's encouraging. We almost had a brownout. I know, I can see it. Hang on. Alright, see, we got things going on here. Apparently this is the first hot day of year, and we had a bit of a brownout going on here. I don't know what's going on. Hang on a second. I'm not shutting it all the way. I want some airflow in here. Wife started panicking, and you know, life is what it is. Anyway, let's see where we were. Breakdown of the Valar, all the history, the Valar and religion. The Valar as mistaken deities. The Valar are not gods, of course, though they are often mistaken as such by men. Countless pantheons include gods that correspond with some or all the powers. Generally localized labels and trappings apply, but the features described of these so-called deities are usually equivalent of those embodied in the Valar. It's a matter of ignorance combined with a local perception. Whether the weather is harsh, the gods who correspond with man may be viewed as powerful and brutal, while the locals blessed with a fair climate, the gods may be weak and or gentle. In any case, the deity is a misconceived version of the Lord of Valinor. So that goes on. There's a whole section on talking about how these are misconstrued as a religion, the Valar's nature, the Valar's dealings, the home of the Valar, pretty much everything you need to know. General powers, the Valar characters, Dunedain and Elden religion, multiplicity of religions, and then we got the Valar Character Glossary. So, the master of crafts and material things, Manwë is the king of the Valar and closer to Uru than any other spirit. Only Morgoth and his spouse Varda rivaled his strength. No Valar stood above him. Melkor, or i.e. Morgoth, the dark enemy. He who rises the might, Namo. So you got a slew. And like I said, these are all mentioned in Lord of the Rings or one of other Tolkien's works, but not in depth. Some have more depth to them than others, and of course the creators and writers took liberty and poetic license to bring them further to life, giving us much more information. Ulmo, Valar, Varda, Vanna, and then we get to the Maiar. The Maiar's history. These would be considered demigods or the servants of the gods, angels, or whatever you want to go. Servants thereof, Maya nature. We know that the five wizards, i.e. Gandalf and Saruman and Ragast and the blue wizards, are all Maya sent by Manwë to help combat Sauron. It is said that Tom Bombadil is also a Maya, and among others, Maya subgroups, the Balrogs and Maya, fire elemental, and there are others. general powers of Maiar characters. We're going to talk about in depth about the wizards or the Astari, the 5 wizards. Maiar Character Glossary. The Bolrog of Moria, Tom Bombadillo. Quite a bit of information there if you really wanted to know. Goldberry. Another Bolrog, Luthien. Melon, Orin, Osei, Sauron, who is also a fallen Maiar, or a Maiar. Just saying. Then we get into more detail of the wizards of the Astari themselves, including the blue wizards, which don't come up briefly in Tolkien, I think, in mention, but for the most part, you don't hear it. This is pretty much all beta canon. Gandalf in a considerable amount of material, Radagast, Surman, and then we get to the third piece, which would be, the elves. So we have an overview of the elves, elven history, when they awoken, their traveling, the time, etc., etc., their nature, language, geographical divisions, elven subgroups. You ever notice in all fantasy settings, all fantasy worlds for the most part, there are many subclasses of elves, very few subclasses of dwarves or subclasses of halflings, i.e. hobbits, for example. Some subclasses of humans, but for the most part, elves are the most notorious, or the most developed, if you will. Then we have an elven character glossary, famous elves through history, and so on and so forth, and quite a bit of that information in here. Here's Arwen's entry prior to the Peter Jackson's version of it, of the story. Círdan, Airedale, Arwen, Elrod's 2 twin sons, Elrod himself, so on and so forth. Quite a few. See, so you got a lot of information here, and if you wanted to have interactions with these quite lofty and quite powerful individuals with your player characters, that's great. If nothing else, it gives you a lot of backstory, background information. I don't know. I guess it would depend on the time setting you want to set your game world in, because technically your players could be Maiar in the First Age and dealing with the great things, or they could be Elvish lords. Here's an entire section on Sauron and in his nature. Ungoliant, the demon spider. And then we got using characters at high level. This will be the equivalent of an epic level set of basic instructions for MERP. And if you're going to have characters that develop that high level, or you're intentionally setting out for the high level campaign, this is giving you some working information to give you a little bit of guidance on how to go about doing that. Increasing bonuses and things like this. Miscellaneous character skill tables, so on and so forth. There you have it, Lords of Middle-earth, Volume 1, The Immortals.